The alarm bells rang through the human research station. New soul as red lights flashed across the control room. Engineer Kim Day was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency signal hit their communications array like a thunderbolt from space. Captain Park Yun to the bridge immediately. The voice echoed through the corridors of their small but advanced spacecraft, floating near the edge of human territory. Day dropped his coffee mug and ran toward the command center. His boots clanged against the metal floors as he rushed past, the humming machinery that kept their station alive in the cold vacuum of space. When he reached the bridge, Captain Park Yun was already standing in front of the massive holographic display, her face pale with worry. "What's the situation, Captain?" Day asked, catching his breath. Park Yun pointed at the swirling display of star charts and signal patterns. "We picked up something big, Day, really big. It's an alien distress call and it's coming from just outside our solar system." The display showed a massive blip on their scanners, something at least 10 times larger than any human spacecraft ever built. The signal was weak but desperate, filled with strange musical tones and electronic pulses that their computers couldn't fully translate. "Aliens?" Day whispered. "Real aliens?" "Looks like it. Our translation software is working overtime, but we're getting fragments. Something about engine failure, families in danger, and they're asking for help." Park Yun touched the control panel, and the alien voice filled the room. The sound was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was beautiful, but terrifying, like whale songs mixed with electronic music. Even without understanding the words, both humans could feel the panic and desperation in the alien voice. "Computer, can you give us any visual?" Park Yun commanded. The holographic display shifted, showing a grainy image of the alien vessel. Both humans gasped. The ship was enormous, shaped like a crystal flower with dozens of glowing sections. It was clearly damaged, with several areas flickering between bright light and complete darkness. "My God," Day breathed. "It's beautiful, but it's dying." Their computer finally managed to translate part of the message. The mechanical voice spoke, in broken Korean. "This is Colony Ship Harmony. 50,000 families, quantum drive failing, need assistance. Peaceful intentions, please help. 50,000 families." The number hit both humans like a punch to the stomach. That was more people than lived in most Earth cities, all trapped in a dying ship in the middle of nowhere. They've never met humans before, Park Yun said, reading the technical data streaming across her screen. "According to our scans, they're called Veltorians. Peaceful species, no weapons on their ship. They're refugees looking for a new home." Day studied the readings. The alien ship was massive but clearly in trouble. Their quantum drive, whatever that was, showed critical failure warnings across every system. "How long do they have?" "At this rate of decay, maybe 3 days before complete system shutdown. After that—" Park Yun didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what happened when life support failed in space. "We have to help them," Day said without hesitation. "Day, we're talking about alien technology we don't understand. Their ship is the size of a small city. What could we possibly do?" But Day was already moving toward the equipment lockers, pulling out his engineering gear. "I don't know, but we can't just watch 50,000 beings die because we're scared of the unknown." Park Yun watched her friend and colleague prepare for what might be a suicide mission. Kim Day had always been fearless when it came to fixing impossible problems, but this was different. This was first contact with an alien species, and they were asking him to board their dying ship. "The language barrier alone could kill you," she warned. "We don't even know if you can breathe their air." "Then we'll figure it out." "That's what humans do, right? We adapt, we improvise, we find a way." Day sealed his emergency suit and checked his portable translation device. "Besides, they're peaceful. They called for help instead of demanding it." The alien distress call continued to pulse through their communications, each repetition sounding more desperate than the last. Somewhere out there in the darkness, families were saying goodbye to each other. Children were crying and parents were holding them close as their world slowly died around them. "Prep the shuttle, Captain," Day said, his voice firm with determination. "We're going to save them." Park Yun looked at her friend, seeing the same stubborn courage that had made him the best engineer in the human fleet. She nodded and began the launch sequence. "God help us all." As their small shuttle detached from the research station and flew toward the massive alien vessel. Neither human knew they were about to make history. They only knew that people needed help, and humans didn't abandon people in need. The docking bay of the Veltorian ship was unlike anything Day had ever imagined. As his small shuttle connected to the massive alien vessel, he felt like a tiny ant crawling into a crystal cathedral. The walls around him glowed with soft blue light, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with energy patterns that hurt his eyes to look at directly. When the airlock opened, Day stepped into a world that defied everything he knew about spacecraft design. Instead of the metal corridors and sharp angles of human ships, everything here was curved and flowing, like being inside a living organism. The floors felt warm beneath his feet, and he could hear a gentle humming sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Welcome, small being," a voice said behind him. Day spun around and came face to face with his first alien. The Veltorian stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that looked like polished silver, and eyes that swirled with colors he had no names for. The creature's body was thin and elegant, with 4 arms that moved like water, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am Chief Engineer Vextar," the alien said, holding up a small device that glowed and translated his words into Korean. "We are grateful you answered our call for help, though I fear there is little anyone can do." Day tried not to stare as he activated his own translation device. "I'm Engineer Kim Day from the Human Research Station. We received your distress signal. How bad is the damage?" Vextar's expression, though alien, was clearly one of deep sadness. "Come, I will show you our dying heart." They walked through corridors filled with other Veltorians, all moving with the same graceful, flowing motion. Day saw families huddled together, children with the same shimmering skin as their parents, all looking worried and scared. The sight reminded him that this wasn't just a technical problem, it was about saving lives. The engineering section was a vast chamber that took Day's breath away. In the center stood what could only be the quantum matrix, a sphere of pure energy suspended in midair, surrounded by rings of crystal that rotated slowly around it. But instead of the bright, steady light it should have produced, the sphere flickered and sparked, and several of the crystal rings had gone dark. "Beautiful," Day whispered, despite the danger. "It was," Vextar agreed. "This matrix has powered our ship for 300 of your Earth years. It bends space itself, allowing us to travel between stars. But now..." The alien gestured helplessly at the failing system. Day pulled out his portable scanner and began taking readings. The numbers made no sense to him at first. The energy levels were beyond anything humans had achieved, and the quantum mechanics involved were like nothing in Earth textbooks. "What exactly is failing?" he asked. Vextar touched one of the control. Panels and holographic displays appeared in the air around them. "The quantum coherence is breaking down. The matrix that holds our drive together is collapsing at the molecular level. According to our calculations, we have perhaps 3 days before complete system failure. And then we drift forever in the void between stars. Our life support will fail within a week after that." Vextar's voice carried the weight of 50,000 lives. "We have tried everything our science knows, but the damage is too extensive. The quantum field is corrupted beyond repair." Day studied the holographic displays, trying to understand the alien technology. It was far more advanced than anything humans had developed, but there was something familiar about the basic principles. Energy was energy, physics was physics, even if the Veltorians had found ways to manipulate it that humans couldn't imagine. "These quantum field generators," Day said, pointing to part of the display. "They're operating at incredible frequencies. How do you prevent harmonic interference?" Vextar looked surprised. "You understand our technology?" "Not completely, but I understand the principles. Energy flow, frequency modulation, field stability. The methods are different, but the problems are universal." Day walked around the quantum matrix, his scanner beeping constantly. "What caused the initial failure? We encountered a quantum storm near the Helix Nebula. The wild energies disrupted our matrix alignment. We managed to escape, but the damage was done." Vextar's forearms moved in what Day was beginning to recognize as a gesture of helplessness. As Day continued his examination, he noticed something that made him pause. The Veltorian technology was incredibly sophisticated, but it was also rigid. Every system had been designed to work in perfect harmony, with no room for improvisation or adaptation. When something went wrong, their solutions were equally precise and inflexible. "Vextar," Day said slowly, "show me your repair protocols." The alien engineer displayed a series of complex procedures, each one requiring specific components and exact conditions. Day realized that the Veltorians approached problems like a perfectly choreographed dance, beautiful, but unable to adapt when the music changed. "These are all standard procedures," Day observed. "Yes, they have worked for 1,000 years, but what if we tried something non-standard?" Vextar's swirling eyes focused on the small human. "Non-standard? That would be dangerous, unpredictable." Day smiled for the first time since boarding the alien ship. Unpredictable is what humans do best. Day rolled up his sleeves and looked at the massive quantum matrix one more time. Around him, a dozen Veltorian engineers watched with their swirling, colorful eyes as the small human pulled out what looked like a basic toolkit from his shuttle. To them, his equipment appeared laughably primitive compared to their advanced holographic interfaces and energy manipulation devices. "Do you wish to repair our quantum matrix with those crude tools?" asked Vextar, his forearms gesturing toward Day's simple scanner, plasma cutter, and portable computer. "Sometimes the best solutions are the simple ones," Day replied, walking around the failing energy sphere. "Your technology is incredible, but you've built it to work perfectly or not at all. Humans learned long ago that perfect rarely exists in the real world." The other Veltorian engineers whispered among themselves in their musical language. Their translation devices picked up fragments, primitive methods, impossible approach. How can basic tools fix quantum mechanics? But Day was already getting to work. He connected his portable computer to one of the Veltorian interface ports, using a cable he'd quickly modified with spare parts from his shuttle. The aliens watched in fascination as his crude human technology somehow managed to communicate with their advanced systems. "Your quantum field is unstable because you're trying to force it back into perfect alignment," Day explained, as data scrolled across his small screen. "But the damage has changed the fundamental structure. Instead of fighting the new pattern, what if we work with it?" Vextar's silver skin rippled with confusion. "Work with quantum corruption? That is impossible. The mathematics require perfect symmetry." "Human mathematics is different," Day said with a grin. "We're really good at making broken things work." He began tracing the energy flows with his scanner, following the chaotic patterns that the Veltorian computers had dismissed as useless noise. But to Day's human eyes, trained by years of fixing malfunctioning equipment with whatever parts were available, the chaos had its own logic. "Look here," he said, pointing to a section where the quantum field was fluctuating wildly. "Your computers see this as a failure, but I see it as adaptation. The matrix is trying to find a new stable configuration, but your control systems keep forcing it back to the old pattern." The Veltorian engineers gathered closer, their tall frames towering over the small human as he worked. They watched in amazement as Day began bypassing their safety protocols with simple wire jumpers and manual overrides. "This is madness," whispered one engineer. "He's removing all our safeguards." "Human engineering," Day said cheerfully. "Sparks," flying from his plasma cutter as he modified one of their quantum regulators. "We call it percussive maintenance sometimes. When something's stuck, you don't always need a perfect solution. Sometimes you just need to give it a good kick in the right direction." As he worked, more Veltorians gathered to watch. Word had spread throughout the ship that the strange little alien was attempting to fix their quantum matrix using methods that violated every principle of their advanced science. Children peered around their parents' legs to see the human who worked with his hands instead of pure thought and energy manipulation. "Your quantum crystals are amazing," Day said, as he carefully adjusted the alignment of one of the rotating rings. "But they're too rigid. On Earth, we learned that flexibility is more important than perfection. A building that bends in an earthquake survives better than one that's completely rigid." He pulled out a roll of metallic tape from his toolkit, something the Veltorians had never seen before. Their technology was all energy fields and crystalline matrices, but Dai began wrapping sections of their quantum conduits with the simple human material. "What is that substance?" Vexitar asked, his voice filled with curiosity. "Isolation tape. We use it to fix everything from spacecraft hulls to computer systems. It's not elegant, but it works." Day pressed the tape firmly against a fluctuating energy conduit, and immediately, the wild oscillations began to stabilize. The Veltorian engineers made sounds that their translators couldn't interpret, gasps of amazement that transcended language. The primitive human tape was actually regulating quantum energy flows that their most advanced systems couldn't control. "Impossible," breathed one engineer. "Crude matter cannot influence pure energy at the quantum level." "On Earth we have a saying," Day replied as he continued his work. "If it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid." As the hours passed, Day's unconventional repairs began to show results. The quantum matrix, instead of fighting against its damaged state, began to settle into a new but stable configuration. The energy sphere still flickered, but the flickering became rhythmic, predictable. "You're not fixing our matrix," Vextar realized suddenly. "You're teaching it to work while broken." "Exactly," Day grinned, sweat beading on his forehead from the intense work. "Humans are experts at working while broken. We've been doing it for thousands of years." The alien crew watched in silent wonder as the small human continued his impossible task. Their perfect, rigid technology was being held together by tape, wire, and sheer human stubbornness. And somehow, miraculously, it was working. The quantum matrix pulsed with new life, its chaotic energies finally finding harmony, not through perfection, but through creative adaptation. The Veltorians had learned something that day about the power of human ingenuity. Sometimes the best solution wasn't the most elegant one, but the one that simply refused to give up. The moment of truth came 36 hours after Day had started his impossible repair job. The entire engineering bay was packed with Veltorian crew members, their tall silver forms creating a shimmering crowd around the quantum matrix. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, and even the ship's captain had come down from the bridge to witness what everyone was calling either a miracle or a disaster in the making. Day wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at his handiwork one last time. The quantum matrix looked nothing like it had before. Where once there had been perfect crystalline symmetry, now there was a beautiful chaos of human engineering mixed with alien technology. Metallic tape held energy conduits in place, simple. Wire bypasses rerouted power around damaged sections, and manual controls replaced sophisticated automated systems. "It looks like a child's art project," muttered one Veltorian engineer. "The most beautiful art project in the galaxy," Vextar replied quietly, his swirling eyes fixed on the small human who had worked non-stop to save their ship. Day connected his portable computer to the main control panel and began the startup sequence. "All right, everyone. This is either going to work spectacularly, or we're going to find out if Veltorian emergency systems are as good as you say they are." The quantum matrix began to hum, a low sound that vibrated through the ship's hull. The energy sphere in the center flickered once, twice, then began to glow with steady light. But this wasn't the perfect white radiance it had produced before. This was something new, a warm golden energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Energy levels are rising," reported one of the Veltorian technicians, his voice filled with disbelief. "Quantum coherence is stable? How is it stable?" The numbers on the holographic displays began to climb. Power flowed through systems that had been dark for days. Throughout the massive ship, lights began to come back on, life support systems resumed their quiet operation, and the gentle hum that meant home to 50,000 Veltorians returned. But then something unexpected happened. The quantum matrix didn't just stabilize, it began to produce more power than it ever had before. The damaged sections that Day had jury-rigged weren't just working, they were working better than the original design. "This is impossible," breathed the ship's captain, an elderly Veltorian named Colvin, whose skin had the deep silver color of age. "The power output is exceeding all our previous records." Day grinned as he watched his repairs come online. "That's because your original design was too perfect. It didn't have any room to adapt or improve. The damage actually created new pathways for energy flow, and instead of trying to eliminate them, I just made them work properly. Vextar's 4 arms moved in complex patterns as he studied the readings. You turned our weakness into strength. The quantum storms that damaged us, you made their chaotic energy part of our power system. Chaos isn't always bad, Day explained as cheers began to erupt throughout the engineering bay. Sometimes it's just change looking for a direction. Humans learned that when we started exploring space. Our ships break down all the time, but we've gotten really good at making broken things work even better than they did before. The celebration spread throughout the ship like wildfire. Families that had been preparing for death began to laugh and cry with relief. Children who had been silent with fear began to play again. The colony ship Harmony was not just alive, it was stronger than ever. Captain Colvin approached Day with steps that seemed almost reverent. Small human, you have saved 50,000 lives today. In our culture, that makes you family too. Every Veltorian aboard this ship. I just did what any human would do, Day replied, embarrassed by the attention but proud of his work. We don't give up on people, especially when they ask for help. As the celebration continued around them, Vextar pulled Day aside. I must ask you something. Your repairs, they should not work according to our science. How did you know they would succeed? Day looked at the quantum matrix still glowing with its new golden light. I didn't know, not for certain, but that's the thing about being human. We try things even when we're not sure they'll work, especially when lives are at stake. But the risk, there's always risk. The risk of failure, the risk of making things worse. But there's also the risk of doing nothing and watching people die when you might have been able to help. Day smiled at his new alien friend. Humans choose to take the risk of action over the risk of inaction. The ship's intercom crackled to life with Captain Colvin's voice. All Veltorians, this is your captain. Thanks to engineer Kim Day of Earth, we are not only saved, we are stronger than before. The quantum drive is operating at 130% efficiency. We will reach our new homeworld 2 days ahead of schedule. The cheers that followed could be heard throughout the massive ship. 50,000 voices raised in celebration, all because one human had refused to accept that something was impossible to fix. As Day packed up his simple tools, he couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow, he would return to his research station and tell Captain Park Yoon about the adventure of a lifetime. But tonight, he was surrounded by new friends who had learned that sometimes the best technology in the universe was the human refusal to give up. 2 weeks later, the massive colony ship Harmony dropped out of quantum space above a beautiful blue and green world that the Veltorians called New Haven. Day stood in the observation deck alongside Captain Park Yoon, who had arrived just in time to witness the historic moment. Below them, the planet sparkled with oceans and continents, a perfect new home for 50,000 grateful aliens. Look at that, Park Yoon whispered, watching as smaller Veltorian ships rose from the planet's surface to escort the colony vessel home. We're witnessing the birth of a new civilization. The welcoming ceremony was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Thousands of Veltorian ships created patterns of light in space, their hulls glowing in synchronized waves that painted the star system in brilliant colors. The ships moved like dancers, creating a visual symphony that told the story of the Harmony's journey and miraculous rescue. Captain Colvin invited both humans to join the landing ceremony on New Haven's surface. As their shuttle descended through the planet's atmosphere, Day pressed his face against the window, watching cities of crystal and light spread across continents, covered in silver forests and floating gardens. They've been preparing this world for 300 years, Vextar explained, as they landed at the planetary capital. Terraform robots have been shaping the environment, creating the perfect home for our people. The spaceport was crowded with millions of Veltorians who had come to welcome the colony ship's passengers. But when Day stepped off the shuttle, something incredible happened. The massive crowd fell silent for a moment, then erupted in a sound that could only be described. As musical thunder, they were chanting his name. Kim Day, the human who thinks beyond logic, Kim Day. Park Yoon stared in amazement as her friend and colleague was lifted onto the shoulders of Veltorian dignitaries and carried through the cheering crowds. Children threw flower petals that glowed with their own inner light, and adults touched their hands to their hearts in what Dai was learning was the Veltorian gesture of deepest respect. "I think you're famous," Park Yoon laughed, walking alongside the procession. The Planetary Council chamber was a massive dome made of living crystal that amplified every voice and translated every word instantly. Representatives from dozens of worlds had gathered to meet the humans who had saved the harmony. Day found himself sitting at a place of honor next to the planetary leaders, still overwhelmed by the attention. "Honored representatives," announced Chancellor Meltar, the leader of New Haven. "Today we welcome not just our saved brothers and sisters, but also our new allies from the world called Earth." The ceremony continued for hours, with speakers from across the galaxy sharing stories of the miracle repair that had saved 50,000 lives. But the most important moment came when a holographic figure appeared in the center of the chamber. A being of pure energy that sparked and crackled with power. "I am Counselor Zarthek of the Galactic Council," the entity announced, its voice echoing through dimensions. "We have observed the actions of the human engineer Kim Day with great interest." Day stood up nervously, still not quite believing. He was talking to representatives of an actual galactic government. Honored Counselor, I just did what anyone would do." "That is precisely what makes your species so fascinating," Zarthek replied. "Most civilizations in the galaxy approach problems with rigid logic and predetermined solutions. But humans improvise. You adapt. You find ways to make the impossible work. The energy being turned to address the entire assembly. The Galactic Council has been watching human space exploration for several years. Your species shows remarkable potential, but today's events have accelerated our timeline considerably." Park Yoon stepped forward. "What does that mean for Earth?" "It means," Zarthek announced, "that we formally invite humanity to join the galactic community. Your problem-solving abilities are unique in the galaxy. Many worlds could benefit from human ingenuity." The chamber erupted in celebration as the implications sank in. Earth wasn't just making first contact. Humanity was being invited to join a galactic civilization spanning thousands of worlds and millions of species. Over the following months, everything changed for Earth. The Veltorians shared their advanced medical technology, extending human lifespans and eliminating most diseases. In return, human engineers traveled to dozens of worlds, solving problems that had puzzled alien scientists for centuries. Day found himself at the center of it all, leading the first Human Engineering Corps, a group of problem solvers who specialized in fixing the impossible. They repaired ancient alien machines, improved faster-than-light drives, and even helped terraform new worlds using techniques that combined human creativity with alien technology. The research station New Seoul became the embassy between Earth and the galaxy, with Captain Park Yoon serving as humanity's first galactic ambassador. Trade routes opened between Earth and 100 worlds, bringing new technologies, ideas, and friendships that would last for generations. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed problem-solving itself. Across thousands of worlds, alien engineers began to experiment with human methods, improvisation, adaptation, and the willingness to try solutions that weren't perfect but might just work. Day often returned to visit the Veltorians on New Haven, where children would gather around him to hear stories of the Great Repair. They called him Uncle Day, and he taught them that the best engineers weren't the ones who followed the rules perfectly, but the ones who knew when to break the rules to help people. Years later, when historians wrote about humanity's entry into galactic civilization, they would point to that moment in the Harmony's engineering bay when a simple human with basic tools refused to accept that something couldn't be fixed. One man's determination to help strangers had opened the stars. To all humanity, the end.